Before we begin this epic tale, if you're ready to dive into the mystical world of Norse mythology, smash that like button, subscribe to our channel for more legendary Viking stories, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Your support helps us bring these ancient tales to life. Now let's journey to the frozen lands of the north. The bitter winds of the northern fjords howled through the wooden longhouses of Ironhold village, carrying with them the scent of pine and the promise of another harsh winter. I pulled my wolf-skin cloak tighter around my shoulders as I stood at the edge of our settlement, watching the aurora dance across the star-filled sky. My name is Ragnar Ironwill, son of Olaf the Bold, and 23 winters have shaped me into a warrior worthy of my bloodline. Our village of Ironhold sat nestled between towering cliffs and the restless sea, home to 300 souls who had survived countless raids, famines, and the cruel whims of the gods. The longhouses, built from mighty oak trees, stood in proud rows along the main path, their carved dragon heads seeming to snarl at any who would dare threaten our people. Smoke rose from every chimney, creating a grey haze that hung over our settlement like a protective shroud. "Ragnar!" called Astrid, my childhood friend and the village's most skilled healer. Her golden hair caught the firelight as she approached, her green eyes filled with concern. "The elders are gathering in the great hall. Your father requests your presence." I nodded, knowing this meeting would determine the fate of our village. For months now, strange omens had plagued Ironhold. Crops withered without cause, the sea yielded fewer fish, and our warriors reported seeing massive shadows moving beneath the ice of the nearby glaciers. The Volva, our wise woman Helga, had cast the runes countless times, but their message remained cryptic and troubling. The great hall stood at the heart of Ironhold, its massive wooden doors carved with scenes of great battles, and the world tree, Yggdrasil. Inside, the air was thick with the smoke of burning torches and the tension of worried voices. Long tables made from single pieces of ancient oak lined the hall, while shields and weapons of fallen heroes adorned the walls. At the head table sat my father, Olaf the Bold, his greying beard braided with silver rings that spoke of his many victories. "Ragnar, my son," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years and countless battles. "Sit beside me. We have much to discuss." The gathered villagers, farmers, craftsmen, warriors, and their families turned their eyes toward me as I made my way through the hall. These were people I had known since birth, folks who had watched me grow from a boy playing with wooden swords to a man who could split an enemy's shield with a single axe blow. Their faces showed a mixture of hope and fear that made my stomach clench with responsibility. Helga, our Volva, rose from her place near the great fire. Her ancient face was marked with ritual scars and painted with protective symbols, her white hair adorned with feathers and small bones. In her gnarled hands, she held a staff carved from ash wood and topped with a crystal that seemed to catch and hold the firelight. "The runes speak of great change coming to Ironhold," she began, her voice carrying an otherworldly quality that made even the bravest warriors lean forward to listen. "A shadow rises from the realm of ice and stone, and our village stands in its path. But the fate threads are not yet woven. There is still time to change what is to come." As if summoned by her words, a tremendous crack of thunder shook the hall, though no storm clouds had been visible in the clear night sky. The great doors burst open with such force that the iron hinges screamed in protest. A figure stepped through the doorway, and immediately every person in the hall fell to their knees in terror and reverence. It was Thor, the thunder god himself. The god stood nearly 8 feet tall, his muscled frame wrapped in a cloak that seemed to be woven from storm clouds themselves. His famous red beard crackled with barely contained lightning, and his eyes blazed with the fury of 1,000 tempests. In his massive hand, he carried Mjolnir, the legendary hammer whose very presence made the air hum with divine power. When he spoke, his voice was like the rumble of an avalanche. "People of Ironhold, Thor's words seemed to shake the very foundations of the hall. "I come with an offer for your finest warrior. Ragnar Ironwill, son of Olaf, step forward." My legs felt like lead as I rose from my seat, but I forced myself to walk steadily toward the god. Every step echoed in the silent hall, and I could feel the weight of every gaze upon me. When I stood before Thor, the heat radiating from his divine form was like standing too close to a forge fire. "Ragnar Ironwill." Thor's eyes bored into mine with an intensity that made my very soul feel exposed. "Your reputation as a warrior has reached even the golden halls of Asgard. I have watched you fight with courage and honor, protecting those who cannot protect themselves. This pleases me greatly." The god raised Mjolnir, and sparks of electric blue energy danced along its surface. "I offer you a choice that has been given to few mortals. Accept my blessing, and I will grant you power beyond imagination. Your strength will rival that of the giants of Jotunheim. Your speed will match the wind itself. Your courage will become legend, sung by skalds until Ragnarok comes. You will become my champion in Midgard, a bridge between the mortal and divine realms." The offer hung in the air like incense, intoxicating and overwhelming. I could feel the divine energy radiating from the god, promising strength that could protect not just my village, but all the Norse lands. With such power, no enemy could threaten those I loved. No famine or disease could touch Ironhold. I would become more than mortal, elevated to serve among the gods themselves. But as I looked into Thor's blazing eyes, I saw something that gave me pause. Behind the divine majesty there was something else, a hunger, perhaps even desperation. The god needed a champion, and that need seemed to go beyond mere desire for a servant. It felt like there was something Thor wasn't telling me, some crucial piece of information hidden behind his magnificent offer. I turned to look at the faces of my people. My father watched with pride and concern, warring in his expression. Astrid's eyes were wide with fear, not for herself, but for what this choice might mean for me. The villagers huddled together, some in awe of being in the presence of a god, others clearly terrified of what divine attention might bring to their simple lives. These were my people, not because of blood alone, but because of choice. Every day I chose to stand with them, to work alongside them, to share their joys and sorrows. They were farmers who coaxed grain from stubborn soil, fishermen who braved dangerous seas, craftsmen who created beauty from raw materials, and warriors who stood ready to defend all of it. They were mortal, fragile, and imperfect, and that made them precious beyond any divine power. "Mighty Thor," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice, "I am honored beyond words by your offer. To be chosen by a god is a privilege that few mortals could even dream of." Thor's expression shifted slightly, as if he sensed what was coming. The electric energy around Mjolnir intensified, casting dancing shadows on the walls of the great hall. "But I must respectfully decline your generous offer." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock that spread through the gathered crowd. Thor's eyes blazed brighter, and I could smell ozone in the air as his divine power responded to his surprise and growing anger. "You refuse the blessing of a god." Thor's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow seemed louder than his earlier thunder. "Do you not understand what you are turning away? Mortals have begged the gods for a fraction of what I offer freely." I straightened my shoulders, drawing upon every lesson my father had taught me about courage and leadership. "I understand completely, Lord Thor, but my place is here, with my people, as one of them. They need a protector who shares their mortality, their struggles, their hopes. Power given by the gods comes with obligations to the gods. I choose to remain bound by obligations to those I love." Thor's expression cycled through surprise, anger, and something that might have been respect. The god studied me for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a note of warning that made my blood run cold. "Very well, Ragnar Ironwill. You have made your choice, as is your right as a free man. But know this, great trials are coming to Ironhold, challenges that may prove beyond the strength of mere mortals. When that time comes, remember that you chose this path. The thunder god raised Mjolnir high above his head, and lightning crashed through the roof of the great hall, illuminating his form in brilliant white light. When the after-images faded from our eyes, Thor was gone, leaving only the smell of rain and ozone to prove he had ever been there. The hall erupted in voices as people tried to process what they had just witnessed. Some praised my courage, others questioned my wisdom, and a few wondered aloud if I had doomed us all by refusing a god's favor. My father placed a heavy hand on my shoulder, and when I looked into his weathered face, I saw pride mixed with deep concern. "You chose with honor, my son," Olaf said quietly, so only I could hear. "But Thor's warning troubles me. We must prepare for whatever is coming." Astrid appeared at my other side, her healing instincts making her study my face for signs of shock or regret. "You look pale," she observed. "Come, let me prepare some mead with herbs. You'll need your strength for whatever tomorrow brings." As the crowd began to disperse, people approached me with words of support or concern. Eric Longbeard, our finest blacksmith, gripped my arm with his powerful hands. "Whatever comes, lad, you'll face it with the finest weapons I can forge." Gunnar Swift Arrow, the best archer in 3 villages, nodded his agreement. "And with arrows that fly true to their target." Magnus Bearkiller, whose massive frame and gentle heart made him beloved by all, simply said, "You chose like a true leader, Ragnar. We stand with you." But as I accepted their support and tried to reassure the more frightened villagers, a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the northern wind still howling through the damaged roof. Thor's words echoed in my mind. Great trials are coming to Ironhold. That night, as I lay in my bed within my father's longhouse, sleep eluded me completely. Through the small window, I could see the aurora still dancing across the sky, but now the lights seemed different somehow, more urgent, almost warning in their wild movements. The family dogs, usually calm and peaceful, whined and paced restlessly, as if sensing something their human companions could not yet perceive. I thought about my brother, Bjorn, who had vanished during a hunting expedition 3 winters ago. We had searched for months, following tracks that led deep into the mysterious ice caves that honeycombed the mountains behind our village. But the trail had gone cold in those frozen depths, and we had never found so much as a trace of his fate. The loss had nearly destroyed our family, and still haunted my father's dreams. Now, as I stared at the dancing lights in the sky, I couldn't shake the feeling that Thor's visit and his ominous warning were somehow connected to Bjorn's disappearance. The thought made my chest tighten with a mixture of hope and dread that I couldn't quite understand. Dawn came grey and cold to Ironhold, bringing with it an unnatural stillness that seemed to muffle even the crash of waves against our rocky shore. I had barely slept, and the few dreams that had come were filled with shadows and the sound of massive wings beating against storm-filled skies. As I dressed in my leather and mail, strapping on the sword and axe that had served me well in countless battles, I could feel the weight of destiny pressing down on my shoulders like a physical burden. The village was unusually quiet as I made my way to the great hall. Even the children, normally boisterous and laughing as they played their games, huddled close to their mothers and spoke in whispers. The animals sensed it too. Horses stamped nervously in their stalls, cattle lowed with anxiety, and the dogs refused to venture far from the safety of their homes. I found Astrid in the hall, tending to old Thorvald, who had fallen ill during the night with a fever that wouldn't break. Her skilled hands moved with practiced efficiency as she applied cool cloths to his burning forehead and prepared healing draughts from her carefully maintained stores of herbs. "How is he?" I asked, noting the deep concern etched into her features. "The fever came on suddenly, and nothing I do seems to help," she replied, not looking up from her patient. "It's as if some unnatural force is fighting against my healing efforts. 3 others have fallen sick since dawn, all with the same symptoms." Before I could respond, a sound echoed across the village that made every person freeze in terror. It was a roar that seemed to come from the very bowels of the earth itself, a sound so deep and powerful that it shook the ground beneath our feet and sent loose stones tumbling from the cliff faces. But this was no earthly animal. There was something alien and terrible in that voice, something that spoke of ancient power and burning rage. I rushed outside, followed by Astrid and every other person in the hall. The villagers were already gathering in the central square, pointing toward the mountains and speaking in frightened whispers. There, rising from the ice caves where my brother had vanished, was a column of black smoke that seemed to reach toward the heavens themselves. "Dragon smoke," whispered Helga, her ancient voice carrying clearly in the still air. "The old stories speak of such things. When the great beasts wake from their slumber, the very earth bleeds shadow and fire." As if summoned by her words, another roar echoed across the landscape, closer this time, and filled with such malevolent fury that several of the children began to cry. The smoke column grew thicker and darker, and now we could see flashes of orange and red deep within the black cloud, the promise of flames that could reduce our entire village to ash. "All warriors to me!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the growing panic. "We need to organize our defenses immediately." Within minutes, 30 of Ironhold's finest fighters had gathered around me. These were men and women who had stood with me through raids and battles, who knew the weight of a sword and the responsibility of protecting those who could not protect themselves. Their faces showed fear. Only a fool wouldn't fear a dragon, but also determination and trust in my leadership. "What are your orders, Ragnar?" asked Eric Longbeard, his massive warhammer already in his hands. Before I could answer, the roar came again, and this time it was answered by another sound that made my blood freeze in my veins. High above us, cutting through the morning air like a knife through cloth, came the sound of enormous wings. The shadow that passed over Ironhold was so large that it blocked out the pale sun entirely, plunging the village into premature twilight. The dragon that descended from the smoke-filled sky was beyond anything described in the oldest sagas. Its body stretched easily 100 feet from snout to tail, covered in scales that gleamed like black iron in the dim light. Its wings, when fully spread, seemed to span nearly twice that distance, and they beat with such power that the downdraft flattened the grass and sent loose thatch flying from rooftops. But it was the creature's eyes that stopped my heart. They burned with an inner fire that was not just rage or hunger, but something more complex and terrible. Intelligence, pain, and a desperate fury that spoke of suffering beyond imagination. And in those burning depths, I saw something that made my knees nearly buckle with shock and recognition. Those were human eyes. Beneath the draconic power and terrible majesty, those were the eyes of someone I had once known. The dragon landed in the field beyond the village with an impact that cracked the frozen ground and sent tremors through every building in Ironhold. When it raised its massive head and fixed those burning eyes on our settlement, every person present felt the weight of its terrible attention. "People of Ironhold," the dragon spoke, and its voice was like the rumble of an avalanche mixed with the roar of a forest fire. "I have come to claim what is mine. Surrender the one called Ragnar Ironwill, and your village will be spared. Refuse, and I will turn your homes to ash and your bones to dust." The threat hung in the air like smoke, and I could feel the eyes of my people turning toward me. Some showed fear, wondering if it might be better to sacrifice one life to save many. Others showed defiance, ready to stand with me against any threat, but all of them waited to see what I would choose. I stepped forward, past the gathered warriors, past the huddled families, to stand at the edge of the village where the dragon could see me clearly. The massive beast lowered its head until we were nearly eye to eye, and the heat radiating from its nostrils made the air shimmer like summer heat. "I am Ragnar Ironwill," I called out, my voice steady despite the terror coursing through my veins. "If you want me, here I am. But tell me, creature, what is your name? What claim do you have on me?" The dragon's eyes flashed with something that might have been surprise or pain. When it spoke again, its voice was quieter, but no less dangerous. I was. The great head tilted slightly, and for a moment, confusion seemed to war with rage in those burning eyes. I am the shadow of Asgard. I am the price of refusing the gods. I am Bjorn. The name hit me like a physical blow, and I staggered backward as the impossible truth crashed over me like a cold wave. This monster, this terrible dragon that threatened to destroy everything I loved, was my brother. My gentle, laughing brother who had taught me to fish in the mountain streams, and who had always been the first to help anyone in need. "Bjorn," I whispered, and then louder, "Bjorn, brother, what happened to you?" The dragon, my brother, let out a roar that was filled with such anguish that several villagers fell to their knees and covered their ears. The thunder god found me in the ice caves. He offered me the same choice he offered you, power in exchange for service. But when I refused, he did not simply leave. He cursed me, transformed me into this abomination, and bound me with chains of divine magic. This understanding began to dawn on me like a terrible sunrise. Thor's offer to me had not been the generous gesture it had seemed. The god had needed a champion, and when my brother had refused him 3 winters ago, Thor had taken his revenge by creating a monster that could be used to pressure me into accepting. He told me I would remain trapped in this form until my brother accepted the divine power he offered. Bjorn continued, his voice now carrying notes of desperate hope mixed with the rage. But when the thunder god learned of your refusal, he released me from my prison with new instructions. I am to destroy Ironhold and everyone in it, unless you reconsider his offer. The evil cunning of Thor's plan was now clear. By refusing his blessing, I had condemned not only myself, but my entire village. The god had known that I would never allow innocent people to die for my choices, and he had created the perfect trap, a weapon forged from my own brother's flesh and powered by his suffering. "Fight me, brother," Bjorn said, and now his voice was quieter, more desperate. "Perhaps if you defeat me, if you end this cursed existence, the spell will be broken and our people will be safe." But even as he spoke, I could see the divine magic that held him. Chains of golden light, invisible to normal sight but blazing clear to anyone who knew what to look for, wrapped around his massive form. These were not merely physical bonds, but magical compulsions that forced him to act against his own nature and will. My brother was as much a prisoner as he was a threat. "There has to be another way," I said, stepping closer despite the heat and danger. "Some way to break the curse without destroying you in the process." There is no other way," Bjorn roared, and the sound carried such despair that it made my heart break. "The curse can only be broken by death or by your acceptance of Thor's blessing, and I cannot control the fire much longer. The magic compels me to attack, and soon I will not be able to resist." Even as he spoke, I could see the struggle playing out in his burning eyes. The dragon's head turned toward the village, and his massive jaws began to part. Deep in his throat, I could see the orange glow of building fire, flames hot enough to reduce every building in Ironhold to cinders in minutes. Behind me, I could hear my father shouting orders, organizing the evacuation of the most vulnerable villagers to the sea caves that might offer some protection from dragon fire. Astrid was helping the elderly and injured, her own safety forgotten in her determination to save others. The warriors were forming up for what would certainly be a hopeless battle, but one they would fight nonetheless because these were their homes and families at stake. "Brother," I called out, putting every ounce of love and determination I possessed into my voice. "Look at me. Remember who you are. Remember our childhood together. Remember fishing in the summer streams and hunting in the winter forests. Remember the stories our mother told us about heroes who found ways to overcome impossible odds through courage and sacrifice." For a moment, the building fire in Bjorn's throat flickered and dimmed. His great head turned back toward me, and I could see my brother's soul fighting against the divine magic that bound him. "I remember," he said, and his voice was almost human again. "But Ragnar, the compulsion is too strong. I can feel my control slipping. You must get our people to safety, and then you must do what needs to be done. The dragon's form began to change, growing larger and more terrible as the divine magic asserted greater control. The golden chains blazed brighter, and I could see the agony they caused, reflected in those burning eyes that were becoming less and less human with each passing moment. But I had not survived 23 winters of Viking life by accepting defeat when those I loved were threatened. As I watched my brother struggle against his divine bonds, an idea began to form in my mind, desperate, dangerous, and quite possibly suicidal, but the only option I could see that might save both my brother and my village. If Thor's magic bound my brother with chains of divine power, then perhaps those chains could be turned against their creator. The gods were mighty, but they were not omnipotent, and their magic followed rules just as mortal magic did. Every spell had a weak point, every curse had a potential loophole, and every chain could potentially be broken if one was willing to pay the right price. I began to run toward my brother, ignoring the shouts of alarm from the villagers behind me. If my plan had any chance of success, I would need to reach him before the divine compulsion took complete control and transformed him into a mindless engine of destruction. The heat grew overwhelming as I approached the dragon's massive form, and the ground beneath my feet was already beginning to crack and steam from the proximity of his building fire. But I forced myself forward, driven by love for my brother and determination to protect my people, even if it cost me everything. 3 months have passed since that terrible morning when the dragon came to Ironhold, and our village still bears the scars of what transpired. The great hall has been rebuilt with timber blessed by our Völva, and new shields hang on its walls, shields bearing the names of heroes who gave everything to protect their people. I survived that day, though I carry wounds that will never fully heal. When I threw myself against the golden chains that bound my brother, accepting their burning touch in order to channel his draconic fire back into the divine magic itself, the feedback shattered Thor's spell in an explosion of light and power that left me unconscious for 7 days and nights. When I awoke, Astrid told me what the villagers had witnessed. My brother's dragon form had dissolved like mist in the morning sun, revealing his human shape once more. But the years of imprisonment and transformation had taken their toll. Bjorn lived for only a few minutes in his true form, long enough to speak my name and to smile at the faces of the people he had helped save. We buried him on the hill overlooking the sea, beneath a stone carved with scenes of his greatest deeds, not as a dragon, but as the gentle, brave man who had been my brother. The Völva says his spirit has found peace in the halls of the honored dead, free at last from the curse that had bound him. As for Thor, the thunder god has not returned to Ironhold. Perhaps he was satisfied by the chaos he caused, or perhaps he learned something about the strength of mortal love and determination. I do not know, and I do not wish to find out. The gods may be mighty, but they are not always wise, and their gifts often carry prices that are higher than they appear. Our village has grown stronger in the months since the dragon's visit. People from other settlements have come to hear the story of how love and sacrifice triumphed over divine wrath, and many have chosen to stay and add their strength to ours. The children who were once frightened now play games where they pretend to be heroes facing impossible odds, and the memory of terror has transformed into a source of pride and unity. I still stand watch at the edge of the village some nights, looking toward the mountains and the stars beyond, not in fear, but in remembrance of a brother who loved his people enough to fight against the very gods for their sake, and who found redemption not in divine power, but in the strength of family bonds that even death cannot truly break. The aurora still dances across our northern sky, but now, when I watch its shifting lights, I sometimes imagine I can see my brother's spirit among them, free, peaceful, and finally home. This is the story of how a simple Viking learned that the greatest power is not what the gods can give us, but what we choose to give to each other. And though the price was higher than I ever wanted to pay, I know that Bjorn would tell me it was worth it to see our people safe and our village strong. In the end, that is what it means to be truly human. Not the power to command the elements or live forever, but the courage to love others more than we love ourselves, and to sacrifice everything for those who matter most. May the gods grant that such choices never come to any of you, but if they do, may you find the strength to choose with honor, as my brother did. Don't forget to like this video if this tale of Viking honor and sacrifice moved you. Subscribe for more legendary Norse stories and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Until next time, may your ancestors guide your path and your courage never falter.